Mid-Atlantic. Here's Sheriff.
Special edition of Weather Scope. Comprehensive coverage of Hurricane Fran from the Weather Channel.
Hurricane Fran is just a few hours away from making landfall in the Carolinas, and with it comes the risk of some tremendous damage and a storm surge as much as 16 feet. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'm Mike Seidel here in the Forecast Center from Atlanta, joined by our senior meteorologist and forecaster, Stu Ostro. And Stu, fortunately not as powerful as Hugo, but still something to be reckoned with there on the beaches near Wilmington.
That's right, Mike. Not a Category 4 or 5, fortunately, but not a tropical storm or a Category 1 hurricane either.
Let's give the viewers at home the latest. This is from the National Hurricane Center as of 7. We're anxiously awaiting the 8 o'clock position. We'll go with the 7 there, Stu. 33.4 north, 78.1 west. Still sustained winds of 115 miles an hour, moving north-northwest at 16. So we're looking at landfall around 11 o'clock tonight based on this current speed. And as you have mentioned several times, and it's a good point to mention the fact that even though the eye will not cross land until then, the northern part of the eye wall will cross earlier.
Right, and actually the center of the eye may even come in a little earlier than that, depending on exactly how it skims along the coast. It's been wobbling a little bit back and forth, but certainly the heavy weather has come on shore, and actually it looks like Cape Fear right around Bald Head Island has just about gotten into the outer part of the eye already.
And something we fortunately did not see, we were a little concerned with last night as Fran crossed the Gulf Stream waters. Unlike Hugo, Fran did not intensify any further.
That's right. It seemed like it has been trying to intensify at times during the past 24 hours, but fortunately has not been able to do so. The eye has been very ragged at times and not very circular. There seems to have been some dry air wrapping in near the center at times, and so it goes to show you that even though you can never trust the Gulf Stream, and certainly many storms, be they tropical or otherwise, have intensified over the Gulf Stream, everything has to be just right for that to happen, and everything also has to be just perfect to get a Category 4 or Category 5 hurricane.
Well, we now have the update from the National Hurricane Center as of 8 o'clock Eastern Time. 33.7 north if you're plotting at home, 33.7 north, 78.0 west, and that puts the eye, the center of Fran, now 40 miles south of Wilmington. So we're talking about another couple of hours, and as you mentioned, it may come in before 11 o'clock tonight. We were looking at the view, the infrared shot, and there it is, and you can see a huge storm here. And already, as that eye makes landfall, the heavy rain bands all the way well north and west of the Raleigh-Durham area, back towards Chapel Hill, the entire Research Triangle area.
That's right, and in this satellite loop, which goes back quite a number of hours, we can see some of the problems that I was alluding to that the storm was having in trying to intensify. The yellows and reds, or at least oranges and blues, are the color-enhanced tops of the storm clouds that we've put in there. And what we would want to see, we wouldn't want to see a Category 4 or 5 hurricane, but what we would be looking for to get an intensifying storm would be a very symmetrical storm, a nicely defined eye right in the middle of a lot of these oranges and reds, and it never really happened, fortunately. A lot of raggedness even at this hour. However, even though it is not intensified, we still see at the very end here, right as it comes on shore, pretty well-defined eye, and a lot of these heavy clouds, as you mentioned, are pushing on shore. This hurricane possesses a lot of tropical moisture. Hurricanes are one of nature's ways of equalizing the imbalance between the tropics and the polar regions, right. And they transport a lot of heat and moisture northward. The moisture part of that is what we're worried about right now as we go through the next couple of days. Soil is already saturated in places upstream, and as this dumps many inches of rain, just like we would hope the people along the immediate coast would be aware of the precautions that need to be taken in the event of a hurricane. Anybody that's living along any low-lying areas near streams or rivers, places that typically are prone to flooding, need to pay very close attention to the weather over the next couple of days.
And the hurricane warnings continue now along the coast. We'll show you those. No changes there with the latest advisory one. We do not expect any changes. Hurricane warnings continue for all the North Carolina beaches, and we can show you those right now, extending from the coast. Well, I thought we had the hurricane warnings. We'll show you the rainfall first, and we'll get to the warnings. But the warnings continue from Eddystone north all the way up towards the North Carolina-Virginia line. And Stu, once again, a better shot here with the radar of the eye of Fran now. And as you mentioned, the northwestern, or the northern part of that eye wall now just about at Cape Fear.
That's right. Let's outline this just a little bit better. Here's the coastline. Here's the border between North Carolina, South Carolina again, And fortunately, South Carolina has dodged a bullet. Unfortunately, what one state misses, another state did not miss, and North Carolina is definitely bearing the brunt of the storm right now. Myrtle Beach, the Grand Strand, and here, and since winds blow counterclockwise around low pressure systems, they're generally getting an offshore flow, so the storm surge problems are not going to be as severe there. However, again, a different story in here, the center of the hurricane and the edge of the eye just about clipping in here. This is Cape Fear and Bald Head Island, right about in there. It's starting to get into the interior of the eye, the heavy weather, very strong winds, ferocious rains pushing on shore just north of there.
That would be Curry Beach, Carolina Beach, and all the way up to Wrightsville Beach. And the Weather Channel's Jim Cantore has been reporting live from Wrightsville Beach. Unfortunately, though, because of the seriousness of the situation and the terrible, terrible weather, we cannot go to him video-wise because of the satellite dish, but we can get Jim on the phone. Jim, can you hear me? And what is the latest right now? What are you experiencing?
Well, Mike, I have to make a point right off the bat, man. I mean, we are in the middle of experiencing a major hurricane here in southeastern North Carolina. I mean, winds are easily sustained at 74 miles an hour with gusts well over 100. And the type of rain that we had preceding the hurricane's approach to landfall here has been excessively heavy. We've had easily a half a foot, if not more, rain. That's added water here to some of the roads and some of the causeways. And I don't really think tide ever went out after it came in today because there is a tremendous amount of flooding. Here we are inland. We are in a protected area right now. And the reason why we can't broadcast to you is because the truck dish can only withstand 100-mile-per-hour winds. And we started losing the signal, the last couple of times. So we decided, hey, let's save the truck. We'll come in here, get out of the weather, and at least allow you to discuss with you what is going on. But we are in the midst of a major hurricane. No doubt about it. There's going to be a tremendous amount of damage, flooding. We've already heard, we've heard transformers snapping all over the place around here. Tree limbs, power lines are down. I mean, it is really a mess here in southeastern North Carolina.
Well, Jim, you've covered other storms for the Weather Channel. How about your sense of being safe? Do you feel safe right now? Do you feel in danger?
I do feel safe, Mike. We moved inland. We moved from the beach about a mile inland here, and we're in a very sturdy structure, a very safe structure. And, you notice I was broadcasting on a balcony, and I was not out there on the street to where we could be hit by some flying debris. So we were safe, even though there was occasionally some rocks from the roof. There's rocks, gravel rocks on the roof that would come around and hit me in the face every once in a while. But all in all, we've pretty much been safe, and we're well aware of that here at the Weather Channel, and we kind of pride ourselves in that sort of thing.
Have you noticed any damage from your viewpoint off the balcony there? Have you seen anything flying around besides those stones?
Yeah, the stones, I mentioned some tree limbs down, transformers have been blown out. But what I can't just begin to describe to you is the tremendous amount of overwash that we're having here in some of these little causeways. I mean, it rises so rapidly. I mean, we're almost surrounded by water now to the east and west of the motel. So we're almost completely surrounded by water. Not enough so that we can't get out, but water has been rising rapidly for the past hour, and the winds have been just unbelievable.
Okay, Jim, stay there and stay dry. We'll try to get back to you in the next half an hour, either via phone, although it looks very unlikely we're going to be able to see Jim and what's going on there because, as he mentioned, with wind gusts to over 100 miles an hour, they have to protect that satellite truck. Hurricane warnings now continuing along the coast from the North Carolina-Virginia border south to Edisto Beach. But again, it's the Myrtle Beach area up towards Wilmington and Wrightsville Beach that will get the brunt of the storm. Already in Wilmington, we've had wind gusts to 82 miles an hour, sustained winds there of almost 60 miles an hour, and they're inland. And as we show you here on the wind field, the hurricane force winds are onshore. And with those onshore winds, let me say the hurricane force winds are onshore, but with the wind blowing onshore to the right of the center, Stu, that is our big concern with storm surge and coastal flooding.
That's right. What Jim was describing is very typical when you have a persistent and consistent onshore flow, in that high tide comes and then the tide doesn't really go out as you head toward low tide. Fortunately, you don't have the additional momentum of a new high tide, and that will hold the storm surge down a little bit, but that's very typical. Probably The most memorable example of that was the Ash Wednesday storm of 1962 along the middle Atlantic coast, where with each succeeding high tide it kept getting higher and higher, didn't go out in low tide. This is going to be more of a quick shot. However, a little bit farther up the North Carolina coast, as the storm moves north, the winds may not be as strong, but they will be strong. They'll be on shore and the tide will be coming in. As we get even a little farther up through Virginia and on up, the winds won't be quite as bad, not quite as much to worry about, but still a pretty stormy night and on into the day.
And we will keep you updated here as Fran makes landfall in the next few hours across the beaches of North Carolina. We'll have continuing coverage and live coverage, weather depending, here from the Weather Channel. Now with the rest of the weather and the impending story, where does all this rain go and what kind of flooding?
This is a special edition of WeatherScope, comprehensive coverage of Hurricane Fran from the Weather Channel.
Hurricane Fran getting set to make landfall. It's a Category 3 hurricane, a dangerous storm, and we've got continuing coverage. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'm Mike Seidel here in the Weather Channel Forecast Center from Atlanta. And we are joined this time around by our tropical specialist, John Hope. And John, you have followed hurricanes since well before I was born. And how does this rack up? Now, we know the last time Wilmington was hit was way back in the mid-50s.
Yeah, well, this is a Category 3. We were fearful last night that it might wind up being a Category 4, such as Hugo was in 1989. Didn't do that. We didn't see any strengthening really in the last 24 hours. And now the center is so close to land that we feel confident that it won't get any stronger than it is.
So fortunately, the Gulf Stream did not add some extra punch to the
No,
storm.
you can't always be sure that that's going to happen. And we know the energy's there. We know the water is warm, and we didn't see anything up in the upper atmosphere that would seem to hinder development. But nevertheless, even under those circumstances, they don't always increase.
Well, we have seen the pressure come up now. This is the latest from the National Hurricane Center. We'll have our next advisory at 9. This is the intermediate, and we just got a fix. And the pressure, 957 millibars. It's now 40 miles the center. The eye of Fran, 40 miles south of Wilmington, North Carolina. Winds of 115 miles an hour sustained. We've had wind gusts already reported at around the coast, around Cape Fear, as high as 120 miles an hour. So we certainly have a very dangerous situation along those beach areas.
And it's a very wide area to the east as we see what the distribution of wind is. The hurricane force winds extend out a long way east of the center of the hurricane. So all that's going to be moving ashore now. So lots of winds coming in on the coast.
Here's a shot now of Fran from space. And remember, the reds and oranges indicating those higher or colder cloud tops. The convection. And if you look close enough, John, you can almost see the eye, although it looks a bit ragged to me as it makes that move towards land.
Well, it does look ragged, and this is very common now. Of course, it's gone across the Gulf Stream now, and some of the circulation is over land, and usually a hurricane will get distorted a little bit when you have that much of the circulation over land.
One thing we want to mention is the wind around the hurricane blowing in this direction, blowing counterclockwise. So those of us who have been following the storm and talking to Jeff Morrow at Myrtle Beach down here, they're getting an offshore wind, and that is really helping them as far as the beachfront property is concerned.
That's right. There's not going to be any appreciable storm surge to the west of where the eye comes in, and that's where Myrtle Beach is. Now, from the point where the eye comes in, which is around Cape Fear, on east 40 or 50 miles, that's where we're looking for our big storm surge of perhaps 12 to 16 feet.
We're talking about places like Curry Beach, Carolina Beach, up to Wrightsville Beach. That would be Cape Fear. Right here is Cape Fear. Here's the state line. Myrtle Beach is right in here. But you can see, John, right here, a little concern about this area of convection. That looks very impressive, at least from a satellite photography standpoint.
And we mentioned those beaches. You just mentioned Curry Beach and Wrightsville Beach and Topsail Beach, the very ones that took the beating in Hurricane Bertha.
And also notice, though, back inland, we're already getting heavy rain around the Raleigh-Durham area. So these spiral rain bands will be moving onshore and up into this mountainous terrain. That is going to be the other story. Certainly once Fran gets onshore and the winds start to diminish due to the frictional effects and the fact that Fran's going to be cut off from its energy source, the warm Atlantic water. Here's our shot. This is our radar out of the coast, or Doppler radar, in the latest image, 3-4 minutes old. And you can see now, John, that the eye wall, at least the northern eye wall, is just about on shore here around Cape Fear.
Well, right at Cape Fear, they're getting the very worst this hurricane has to offer right now, because that's where the winds are the strongest, right in the eye wall. And with the northward moving hurricane, and with this hurricane in particular, the strongest winds in the hurricane are in that north eye wall.
Okay, I'm just drawing on the coastal boundaries, and Cape Fear right in here, Myrtle Beach right here. So those of you watching from Horry County, where there has been mandatory evacuation east of Highway 17 and the bypass since yesterday at 2, still getting some pretty tremendous rain bands blowing in now as that storm circulates the rains off the Atlantic.
That rain is going to be very, very heavy, and it's going to extend inland pretty rapidly. It already has, as you can see that. And even after, as you pointed out, the hurricane dies, as all hurricanes do over land, the precipitation is not going to dwindle. It's going to be heavy. It's going to be enhanced some by the mountains. And so we could be looking at a situation with an awful lot of rain and the potential for flooding.
Okay, John, what do you make of this? I've noticed here on the northern eye wall, we're getting obviously heavy rains, a lot of bright colors, but on the southern eye wall, it's hardly even intact radar-wise.
Well, I'm not quite sure. I don't think we have anywhere near as much rain on the south of the eye as we have to the north of it, but some of the radar might be cut out there a little bit. There might be a little bit of attenuation. But I do think that once the eye goes past and the hurricane continues to move to the north, that the rain is not going to last very long to the south of the eye.
We've got hurricane warnings continuing from the North Carolina-Virginia border south to Edisto, but again, the worst weather in the next 3 to 4 hours will be along and to the right of the center of the landfall. The eye of Hurricane Fran now making a move towards Cape Fear, and those hurricane force winds already on shore, and that means that hurricane conditions continuing, and these are the areas which are going to be really hit hard, as John mentioned, along and to the right, anywhere from Cape Fear up towards Wrightsville Beach. That storm surge could total up as high, get this, as high as 16 feet. Now, a wind gust now coming in from Wilmington, John, although Wilmington is not right on the coast, 81 miles an hour.
That's a gust, and very, very strong winds. They've had a tremendous fall and pressure at Wilmington, and the center of the hurricane is aimed pretty much in that direction.
Okay, now let's touch base on that storm surge again. We're talking about 12 to 16 feet. Unlikely now. We probably want to adjust this here on the air, but it's unlikely we're going to see that kind of storm surge here in Horry County around the Myrtle Beach area.
You're absolutely correct. The storm surge is going to be from the point where the eye crosses the coastline on up to the northeast.
In these areas here.
Right.
Anywhere from 12 to 16 feet. That obviously will be the big concern, because although the winds are strong and we've already had reports of some damage from our crews in Myrtle Beach and Wrightsville Beach, the wall of water, that storm surge, will be coming on shore. Fortunately, coming on shore at time of low tide or as the tide goes out.
Very nearly so. We had a high tide this afternoon, and the next one is not until after midnight, and by that time we think the eye of the hurricane will be well inland.
And because of the serious weather, we've had to kind of keep the satellite dishes at bay and keep them in safe haven, but we do have on the phone Tom Ditt. He is with the emergency management folks in southeastern sections of North Carolina. Tom, give us the latest, and what have you heard as far as damage from those areas around Wilmington?
Or the water spout that hit the Surf City Bridge further up the coastline from Wilmington. This is the same area that got Bertha's impact several weeks ago. Also, we lost a mobile home which was being used by the police department in North Topsail Beach.
How many shelters do you have right now open, and can you give me an estimate of how many people are in those shelters this evening?
We have 106 shelters open across eastern North Carolina, and the last information we have on numbers, over 1,100 in shelters.
Have you had any reports of the power going out yet?
We have widespread power outages across those areas, down trees, power lines, anything that's going to be associated with high winds.
And where are you sitting right now as you talk to us on the phone?
I'm in the state EOC in Raleigh.
Okay, and even in Raleigh, you're getting some of the fringe effects already.
Notice coming into work about an hour ago, heavy rain here in the Raleigh area.
John Hope has a question for you.
Tom, do you have any assessment yet on how this might compare with Bertha down there as far as the damage you've heard about so far?
We're talking a category stage higher, John, so we can expect that the damage is going to be a little bit higher than what we saw during Bertha. But of course, Bertha came on up the coast and turned inland towards Swansboro, whereas Fran is coming inland over the Cape Fear area and Wilmington.
Okay, Tom Ditt, that is certainly a nice update. We got the word there. Thousands in shelters, 106 shelters open in eastern North Carolina, so everybody got out of harm's way, and for good reason. Also in the thick of things, the Weather Channel's Jill Brown. She joins us now on the phone again from the Bolivia, North Carolina area. That is southeast of Wilmington, not far from the coast in Brunswick County. And Jill, what is the weather like there right now?
Well, Mike, we are at the Emergency Operations Center here in Brunswick County, and the winds, of course, are howling. They were gusting over 100 miles per hour an hour ago, and of course will continue to strengthen at this point. We actually have a terrific setup right where we are. We're on the south side of the building, so we have blocked the winds basically by the building. We had a terrific shot for you earlier, but the problem is that the rain is so heavy that the satellite, basically we can't get through the rain to get to the satellite. But we're in a good location, a safe location at the Emergency Operations Center. It's not a shelter, but they do have 4 shelters open in Brunswick County with about 1,700 people in them. Here at the shelter, they have the Weather Channel on the big screen, by the way, if the satellite holds up. And they told us when we got here about an hour and a half ago that this is ground zero, according to the National Hurricane Center. About a half hour later, they started getting a little hopeful that they thought they was going to make this, the eye was going to make that turn and head to the north. So I talked to you, John, about that, and you told me that that's probably not going to happen. So they are prepared. They've had reports, of course, of trees down mainly so far, but other than that, not a whole lot of injuries.
And where did you drive in from this afternoon and this evening to Bolivia? Where were you before?
We came up from the Isle of Palms, of course. We were in Isle of Palms yesterday. We were in Charlotte this morning. Drove up. We, of course, saw tons of traffic heading away from the coast, as we were one of the few cars heading toward the coast, but not a huge backup. It seemed to be pretty orderly. Folks had boarded up and had taken the opportunity to get out of town when they could. I guess smart enough to know that the best way to avoid injury from Fran is to just get out of the way.
Well, Jill, what are you able to actually see now from your vantage point there in the EOC building?
Actually, we have a terrific view, again, because we're blocked by the building. We're a protected area, but we can see everything. We have a lot of pine trees around us, and as you know, they're kind of soft, so they'll bend way over, but not really fall over most times. If you're lucky. The winds are really blowing, very heavy rain. The front door had to be locked because it's on the north side, and it was kind of getting sucked open. But things seem to be in order here. And again, we're not seeing much damage right around here, but they did tell me that some of their equipment, now they're going to have to go and kind of try to get it out because the trees have fallen and blocking some of it. There are, of course, some trees down on the roadways, reports of some trees down on some homes.
Is it your perception that the rain is increasing and the winds are increasing even as we speak?
They have been increasing somewhat. The rain, of course, tends to kind of get heavier and get a little bit lighter, as the winds will as well. But the one thing, John, that I noticed when we were in Hurricane Aaron, my producer Tim and I, talking about how it's very similar to this. Of course, this is a stronger hurricane. You had asked me, can we hear the howl? And we could hear it a little bit. Boy, could you hear it earlier here. And if I stepped outside, it's very eerie. You can hear it.
Well, what you need to look for in another couple hours is a bit of a calm there. If you get that, you'll know you're in the eye.
That's what we expect. As a matter of fact, by 9 o'clock, we're hoping if the rain lets up just a little bit, maybe if we get in between bands, we should be able to get a picture out to you. And, of course, if the eye comes right over here, as it is expected to do, we should be able to broadcast to you at that point. It's not the winds that's the problem, it's the heavy rain.
Well, we hope to see you.
Okay, Jill. We'll keep our fingers crossed for that live transmission tonight. Jill Brown reporting from Bolivia, North Carolina, in Brunswick County. Now on the phone with us is Jim Cantore. He has really been in the most serious weather. We lost our video transmission earlier because of the high winds in excess of 100 miles an hour. He's at Wrightsville Beach. We want to remind you, though, we pulled Jim away from the barrier island. We've got him over on the other side of the intercoastal, so he's in a safer place, and he's up on the second floor of the building. Jim, tell us what you're experiencing now as the eye draws closer.
Well, we're definitely experiencing the northern eye wall right now. Winds are easily sustained over hurricane force, and the gusts have been well above 100 miles an hour. As a matter of fact, as you know, Mike, you were mentioning we had to take the satellite truck down, and it was even hard getting a signal out. But we are protected here on the second floor, and we do think that when the eye wall does come on overhead, we may be able to get you another signal and give you an idea of what's going on around here. But I absolutely cannot believe the amount of overwash that's occurred. It's almost like the tide, when it came in, never went back out, even though we're going to see this thing around low tide. I don't really think that those tides came out. John, is that possible?
Well, yes. When you have a high tide like that and then the wind continues to blow, you do get the water trapped, and the water doesn't get out. And that's one element that contributes to even a higher storm surge when the center does come in.
Do you think up in the western ends of those sounds that there's going to be some flooding with this kind of wind?
Yes, I do. I think there will in those rivers, because those rivers are tidal rivers to some extent. And when you got a strong east wind, such as you'll have up there on the Sounds when the hurricane goes up to the north, indeed, you will have some flooding up some of the rivers, I'm afraid.
Well, I'm telling you, too, there's been at least 6 to 12 inches of rain here today, in addition to what we've seen over the past couple of days. So everything is extremely wet. As far as what I saw before the lights went out, if you will, and we couldn't broadcast anymore, there have been some large limbs down. We saw several transformers blow, and of course the winds and that howling sound is just very, very apparent.
Jim, can you give us some sense of how far you are from the intercoastal and how far the water has gotten? Is the water lapping at the front door there of the hotel?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't know how better to put this, but the wall is pulsating. I mean, you can feel it when the winds really gust hard, kind of pulsate in and out a little bit, because we're facing right in the direction of those winds out of the east-northeast. So we're getting the brunt of it here in the face of the hotel. But there's just no question, Mike, that we have a tremendous amount of wind energy right now with this eye wall, and we're hoping that we can definitely see a little bit of a break here, because it's kind of nerving to just deal with this for a long period of time.
Okay, Jim, stay safe, and hopefully we'll get a shot from the eye wall. I think that would be maybe a first here on the Weather Channel, and that may happen in the next hour or so as Fran crosses near Wrightsville Beach. That was Jim Cantore. Also on the line is Jeff Morrow. The Weather Channel's Jeff Morrow from Myrtle Beach. Again, weather causing some problems with satellite transmissions. No surprise here, but Jeff is in a different situation because